In this section of the tutorial, we are going to insert static meshes and move them around, duplicate them, and you'll know how to search for static meshes, how to place them in your level, how to scale them, how to take a look at them and just manipulate and get a better understanding of how to use static meshes. So we have our environment blocked in. We have a test light, we have some human scale reference for judging scale and dimension, and what we need to do is we need to place a few static meshes to begin kind of detail and get an overall feel of the environment, which direction is going to go. Static meshes are used to detail your environment, to make it functionable. You can even create an entire environment using static meshes and not using any BSP brushes. So let's begin to cover how to use static meshes now. So if we go up to the content browser, we have under packages, we can search individual package for all the content that's inside that package. Under here, under object type in the top, we can narrow the search to only static meshes, to only materials, textures. So if we click on static meshes, and then if we begin clicking through some of these packages, we can see that some of these packages have static meshes that we can use. You can also search by individual package. So if we type in wall, we have a few packages that are named wall, and there's a few static meshes that are in here that we can use. Let's clear that. We can also click on all assets, and under here, type here to search, we can search individual name of the static mesh. Making sure that we have static mesh checked, we can type in wall. So this will search the name of the static mesh and not the package. So here we have a wider option of looking at all various static meshes that have the name wall in them. And if you're not quite sure what kind of static meshes that you want, you can just simply clear the search, make sure you have static meshes set, click on all assets, and just browse through all the static meshes that are included within UDK. Now, the static meshes that are included with UDK are fairly limited. You're limited by the type of environment you can create within the static meshes that you are given with UDK. For better variety of the type of environment you want to create, you will need to create your own static meshes by using Maya or 3ds Max, and then model those assets and then export them and then import them inside UDK. But in the meantime, you do have some options that you can use to create some of the environments, especially if you are beginning to learn UDK. So just by going through, we have quite a few static meshes that I think I may want to use. So let's grab this deco storage tanks and let's just place it somewhere inside the map. Go right over here, and there's a couple of ways you can place a static mesh. You can either simply left click, drag, place it right in here, and right now I don't see the static mesh, so let's close the content browser. And the reason I don't see my static mesh that I placed is because I have static meshes turned off. If you click the W key, this will cycle through static meshes on and off. And then I can simply place this static mesh on the bottom, on the floor, and just kind of position it where I want it. Another option is if you want to put your static mesh down on the floor without having to move it, if you press the End key, this will move the static mesh down to the floor of your geometry. Then we can jump back into top view and position this a little bit better where we want it. And again, if we take our human reference scale, move it a little bit closer to the static mesh, we can kind of better see the scale of the static mesh. Another quick way of placing static meshes inside the level is by going in the content browser, selecting the static mesh you want. Let's close the content browser. Holding down S key and then left click, this will place the static mesh right inside the map. And then we can move it up and we position it where we want. Right now the static mesh is large, so let's cover how we can scale static meshes. There are a few ways you can scale a static mesh. One is by selecting the static mesh and then pressing the spacebar key a couple of times until you get the scale gizmo, and then we can resize this up or down. Another way of doing so is by selecting the static mesh, we can go under here. You have a couple of options of resizing. You have X, Y, and Z options that you can input the values to. So if we press 0.5 here, it scales it in Z. But we can also scale it in X, Y, and Z uniformly all at once by setting the first value to, let's say, 0.5. This will scale uniformly in all directions. And now we can move it down, and now it's a little bit better fit. And then we can move it off to the side or do whatever else we need to do with it. So let's take this static mesh and let's scale it a couple of times. Let's scale it to a little higher. Let's use the gizmo tool. Let's scale it up to something a little larger, something like this. And then we can move it away from the wall, right around here. Few other options you have for static meshes. If we go into the content browser, if we double click on the static mesh, and here we can have a preview window. We can take a look at it by left clicking. We can zoom in and zoom out and pan left and right click will rotate, and we can look around the static mesh. There's also a set of properties we can take a look at, as well as in the top toolbar we have take a look at the collision. We can take a look at the wireframe. All of these will come in very handy when you're creating your own custom static meshes. But at this point, this is a nice preview that you can take a look at and see if you want to use it. And by going into the perspective viewport, if you select the static mesh and press F4, or by double clicking on the static mesh, the same property windows will come up. And here you can take a look at all the static mesh properties for that particular one. Look through various options that you can set for that specific static mesh. And let's close this. And again, if we want to duplicate the static meshes that we already have placed in our scene, we can use the same function as we did for our brushes by holding down Alt, drag, and duplicating it.